This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den.
And welcome into the Huskies Warming House Podcast, episode 150 here on the show in mid to late February here on this Sunday, February 19th. Myself, Noah Grant, joined alongside by Nick Maxon, as always. Nick, hopefully you're feeling well. It sounds like you're feeling a little bit under the weather, so we're going to try to keep the talking to a minimum, because that's what we do on this show, right?
Yes.
With that being said, a lot to talk about, of course, in the men's hockey world and St. Cloud State, and a interesting weekend in North Dakota, I guess. Let's just call it that. Women's side of things, very successful weekend for them. They have set up their first round matchup in the WCHA playoffs. We'll talk about that. There's one more regular season game left to be played in the WCHA as a whole, and then we will have our seedings getting ready for next weekend. Minnesota Wild as well. A bit of an average week, so to speak. Just again, more of the same confusion
by
I
our
guess.
standards.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll dive into that, and then the extra ice session, we're going to talk a little bit about the trade deadline and see if we can rustle up some thoughts there. Of course, the trade deadline March 3rd of this year, so it certainly is coming up fast in the National Hockey League. But we start, as always, with Center Ice View News and Notes and the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup.
Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Center Ice View News and Notes, Noah, and it's not too much in terms of news that we have this week. So we start with some news that became official. Now, we alluded to this last week, and that was the NHLPA looking for their replacement for Donald Fehr. Looks like they finally do have it. Again, as we reported last week that they were inkling towards it, it's now official. Marty Walsh has been named now as the new executive director to the NHLPA. So that was officially announced on Thursday. Again, Marty Walsh, the U.S. Secretary of Labor, will be taking over for Donald Fehr, and kind of a critical juncture coming up, Noah, as I know that the CBA due to expire the next couple of years. So hopefully no lockouts, but that's never a guarantee in the NHL. So congratulations to Marty and joining the NHLPA, in which hopefully won't be the biggest dumpster fire in the world. So moving on, this is not a dumpster fire. In fact, maybe one team is. The other one is certainly pushing all of their chips. And when we say all of their chips, we do mean every single chip. That is the big trade. St. Louis Blues trading their captain, Ryan O'Reilly, and Ford Noel Achari to the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was a team that was looking to make a big splash. So here's what happens. They get Achari. They also get Ryan O'Reilly, a 2023 first-round pick, going back to St. Louis, a 2024 second-round pick, a 2023 third-round pick that was originally with Ottawa. They also get forwards Mikhail Abramov and Adam Gaudette. So, but it wasn't done just yet, right, Noah? Because if it wasn't the Maple Leafs, who didn't have a lot of cap space, they needed a third partner in this, and they got one. So what actually happened is the Blues traded the Ryan O'Reilly to Minnesota, retained half of his salary, and then in contrary, Minnesota Wild, after the best stint in Minnesota Wild center history, flipped Ryan O'Reilly, and then retained an additional 25% of his salary. So how about that, huh? Now, Minnesota, because of them being kind of the third wheel in this, get a 2025 fourth round pick. And then also the Wild, because you have to trade somebody too, they also gave up a prospect, Josh Pillar, to the Maple Leafs. So kind of a multi-layered trade. There's been rumors that the Minnesota Wild may weaponize their cap space, and being at the Wild, they're in a position that there are, and I'm sure we'll dive into the Minnesota Wild aspect a little bit later. This is a bold move by Kyle Dubas, who, I mean, we've said it for the past couple of off seasons, right, Noah, that was this the last one? You know, was this the big push by the Maple Leafs? This is the biggest one we've seen so far.
Yeah, they did win actually in Ryan O'Reilly's first game as well. It's kind of weird from a Wild fan perspective, though, because, you know, you look, I think Minnesota, I'm trying to remember what it was. It's like, I think it's $1.2 or $1.4 million that they're retaining in this. I wonder if there's something behind the scenes that Bill Guerin is kind of stirring up a little bit by doing this move, because if you look at it on the surface for Minnesota, it doesn't really have a whole lot of advantages. I mean, a fourth round pick is not really anything to shout about. So I don't know if this is like a good relationship. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours a little bit later type of thing. I wonder where Minnesota fits into this, because they didn't really gain a whole lot. Like I feel like in this situation, it's like, oh yeah, we'll retain 25% of your salary, but you have to give us a second rounder, you know, like something where it's an overpay for what you're doing kind of thing, like a fourth rounders to seventh rounders, they hand those out like candy, because, you know, obviously the big fish are in the first 2 or 3 rounds. So I wonder if there's more to come for Minnesota. On their standpoint, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I mean, credit, like you mentioned, credit Toronto. They got their man that they were looking for. Wild certainly probably could have used Ryan O'Reilly in the middle, though, if they could afford him.
And Noah, not to cut you off,
go ahead.
But I think, if anything, this provides us an indication of where Bill Guerin is at right now, right? And, you know, he didn't go out and, because let's be real, the cap space situation in Minnesota isn't great right now. Granted, this cap hit, I believe, only stays on the Minnesota Wild books just until the end of the season. Because Ryan O'Reilly is a true rental, again, becoming a UFA, did not really get many contracts extension talks in St. Louis. And again, I think it was Sportsnet that tweeted out, once Ryan O'Reilly was traded and only 5 current remaining Blues were part of that 2019 Stanley Cup run, they're still on the roster. That's just insane to think about. But you kind of wonder if Bill Guerin's sending a message here, because with cap space just so limited, and he's essentially taken already, 1.5 essentially to use as part of being a trade partner, you kind of wonder if Bill Guerin is thinking that maybe they won't be as buyers. This is an indication of that. We don't know, obviously, but
so
it is strange, right? It is very strange for the Wild to be part of this, and you kind of wonder if there's more behind the scenes and maybe more cooking.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, or something for future things. I'm not sure. Not that the NHL works like that. I mean, it's not like Bill Guerin can say, "Oh yeah, if you do this in a year, we're looking to do this, and you need to be a part of this." Like,
right.
the trade was what it was. Projected cap space for Minnesota is $2.9 million. The Ryan O'Reilly dead cap hit, because why don't we add on to the small amount that the Minnesota Wild already have? Of course, the dead cap hit for Ryan O'Reilly is 1.875. Right now. So just to give folks an idea of Minnesota, essentially going from about 5 million, 4.8 million in cap space to about $2.9 million in projected cap space right now. So keep an eye on that one, obviously. Moving over to only a couple more topics here. We're going to start actually with one that's not on Nick's sheet here, but had to add it in. Paul Gerard died at the University of Omaha this past Thursday. He was 57 years old. Of course, one of the things that's most interesting in his coaching tenure, one of the few black assistant coaches in the NHL. There's only 2 current ones right now, so kind of paving the way there. Winnipeg native, Lake Superior State standout in the early 1980s, had 113, I believe, points in 156 games, 14-year NHL and AHL professional career. cup of coffee with the Minnesota North Stars, played a lot in the AHL, Hershey Bears, Colorado Rangers, Kalamazoo, Albany, Milwaukee as well. Won a Calder Cup in his last year in 96, 97, and played almost 700 professional games. So obviously a very difficult news, especially in the NCHC world. He'd been at the University of Nebraska Omaha since 2018 and quietly kind of dealing with cancer as well too. So really one of his highlights is his ability to develop players and really connect with them on that level and really work on that development process. And you think about a program like the Mavericks have there. I mean, that's kind of what you're looking for is, they kind of remind me of St. Cloud a little bit, where they take these guys that maybe are not these high-end blue chip prospects and they turn them into that where they're able to develop by the end of their collegiate career. So obviously a very difficult time for the Maverick community. Of course, his wife Cheryl, 2 daughters, Catherine and Megan, both survived for Paul there. So yeah, difficult news for the hockey world. I mean, just really tough. I think, obviously he spent a couple seasons in the NHL with Calgary and Dallas, one with the Colorado Avalanche too. So a lot of coaching experience, just overall a very great human, what he brought to the table, I think, for a lot of young collegiate hockey players, bringing that experience, and heard nothing but good things. So wishing his family obviously the best. Anything you wanted to add there, Nick?
It's such a tragedy. When we hear stories like this, and again, reading the reports, you got the sense, when you mention the word quietly, right? There are certain folks when they go through these things, they kind of share this thing publicly, and, that's kind of the way that they cope. And from what we know, that wasn't the way he wanted to handle this, right? He essentially kind of brushed it off. And I don't mean that in a direct translation type deal, but in sort of like, hey, okay, I'm doing this, but I'm not going to make this a focal point of my everyday life. It'll be fine. He was a positive human being. And when the news broke, certainly, the hockey world, he's well known, well versed, one of the nicest human beings that was out there. And as you mentioned, kind of a trailblazer in terms of black coaches in the NHL and around hockey, right? So tough. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers go out to his family, Nebraska Omaha, and everybody that who knew him. Just tough news. Just way too young, way too sad.
Yeah, definitely. Wishing everybody around that program, obviously dealing with that the best. It's also a tough transition, obviously, for Omaha to have to move on from that so quickly. They had Miami last weekend, and of course, we'll get to that later on in the show. In other news, Alex Ovechkin's father, Mikhail, died at the age of 71 this past week. He posted that on social media. So wishing the great 8 the best out there in Washington, D.C. Kind of a tough little thing. He had to take some personal leave as well, too. So just kind of an interesting note there. Second to last topic, 2 signings here that we had. Mikey Anderson, the LA Kings, an 8-year deal, $4.125 million average annual value. He's 23, 13 points in the back end and 55 games played. He's on that top pairing with Drew Doughty, so has certainly made it work. And then Olli Maatta of the Red Wings, a very serviceable defenseman, 2 years, $3 million average annual value, a guy that just continues to steadily earn contracts as he goes through his career, 28 years of age. And then on the injury side, we only have one actually stemming from last week. Ottawa netminder Anton Forsberg now out 2 to 3 months with bilateral MCL tears. And welcome into the main portion of the show, episode 150 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant, here for another week in the den. It's we expected this show was going to release on Tuesday, and then my clinical schedule changed, and we are now here at 8:15 in the morning on a Sunday, and I'm actually headed to work after this. So it's going to be an interesting day. Of course, I'm in the ER in the hospital, so it's been interesting couple of days. Obviously got a couple more left and didn't expect that we were going to have released this early. So it's kind of nice to have that come out. I'm hoping this is going to come out on Sunday, on the day that we're recording it, but you never really know how long some of these things take. So at worst, we're going to come out Monday morning. So whenever you're hearing this, welcome to the den here. Nick, anything interesting this weekend? Obviously you're feeling a little bit under the weather. So, I mean, it's not the greatest, but
no, I think the big thing for me is, as we talked about earlier, I think just now that we've got two big trades, the one thing I'm watching in the NHL is, now that O'Reilly's off the board and Tarasenko's off the board, next big fish is Timo Meier, right?
Yeah.
See what he ends up where he ends up going. You can throw the Maple Leafs off that list now. So it appears to be what the Devils seems to be the front runner that got the assets and everything else to land him. So I don't know. I'm curious. I'm also curious to see if the Sharks move Erik Karlsson, although that is a long shot just based on his contract structure and however everybody's up against the cap. And I don't know. And how about the Bally stuff too, right?
That's
interesting, right? And I talked about this with a couple folks this week, and the big fears of blackouts and here and there, and I don't know what the solution is going to be. No, I know that we've talked about it in the past, but I think my big fear is for the NHL. That is, the NHL is already so fragile as it is right now, and you take away Bally's and some of their broadcast rights payments out of the way. This could have cap implications as early as next year. I mean, heck, they were thinking maybe just $1 million, and now could it be a flat cap again? I mean,
right.
I laugh. It's no laughing matter, but in a juncture where the Wild could use any bit of money they could get, that's now could be in serious jeopardy, and even more so. You kind of wonder what next year will look like in terms of where people can watch the games. So it's been an interesting week, to say that much. I'm curious for your Noah though, because since you asked me, with clinicals coming up for you and your schedule's going to get pretty nuts, you're getting close to the end of your run.
Yeah.
In terms, how does that feel?
Yeah, no, it's been interesting, to say the least. I think anytime
Western of you, it's been interesting.
Yeah, well, come hang out in an ER for a couple of days. You'll learn what the definition of interesting is. For sure.
Spent plenty of time in the hospitals myself, unfortunately. So
yeah,
an idea, unfortunately.
I actually the first day I was there on. What day is it now? I don't even see. This is the hard part about nursing. You don't even know what day it is. Funny, my girlfriend is a school teacher, and I texted her yesterday. And for those keeping up, yesterday was Saturday. I texted her, and I was like, have a great day at work. And she's like, no, it's Saturday. I don't work. I'm like, oh, I don't know what day it is. But the first day I was there, which I believe was a Friday. Yeah, I got hit in the face like 3 times. That was great. So I had to. We had to get a gal in a vehicle, and can present challenges when said vehicle is very high and said person needs to be boosted into the vehicle, and they're not happy about said situation. So yeah, but as far as the overall journey, it's been all right. It's been kind of an awkward final semester in the sense that every decision that you make is a big one. You're trying to get things set up to actually have a job. You're trying to get things set up for your living situation. You're trying to obviously finish school. You're getting ready for your boards. So it's an exciting time, but at the same time, that just a lot of transitions into the next chapter, while also making sure you close the current chapter and finishing those things up. So it's kind of a weird little balance, I think. That's as we say in the Midwest, a little interesting. But other than that, it's been all right. As far as scheduling is concerned, we should have a normal show next week. And then the week after, we're definitely going to have some alterations, not only with my schedule, but your schedule as well, too. So we're definitely going to have a later release on that one. There's not going to be any Sunday surprises, I don't think, for that one. We're going to be pretty uptight against it, just like the Wild are with the salary cap for sure. So we'll keep you up to date. I'm assuming after that, things might level out as we approach the postseason action here. We'll obviously do a tournament deep dive before the tournament happens at some point, probably not next week, maybe the week after, because we'll have a clearer picture of where we're going to be at tournaments, those sorts of things. So, but yeah, excited for everything that's coming down the pipeline here, I think, with that. And then, of course, the NAHL, you and I both know everything heating up in that conference as well, too. So, yeah, a lot to look forward to and really excited for it. Why don't we start with the College Hockey World, NCAA here? Some games that maybe a little bit of a surprise. We'll have to see. Michigan, Ohio State, Thursday, Saturday here. OSU, technically a sweep. I mean, it was 4-3 in a shootout the first night, 4-2 on Saturday night. So a good little weekend for OSU. Minnesota, Penn State, Gophers sweeping 7-2 and then 3-2 in overtime. And this one, Michigan State, Wisconsin, pair of 6-2 scores. The Spartans in night number 1, Wisconsin in night number 2. A big win for them as Notre Dame was off this weekend. Are we surprised that the Badgers did this now? I mean, how do we feel about Wisconsin this week?
They a little bit, but you kind of get the sense too, Noah, that I think for those who listen to the latest NCAA with myself and Ben Holden, there's no secret that, and I think the expectation is there's going to be a change at Wisconsin. Now, granted, we don't know that to be the case for sure. But it's been tough, right? And you look at some, the pipeline they got coming up, and let's just say that compared to the other Big Ten schools, it's anemic at best. So I think there's a little bit of motivation there. Granted, they had a very slow start, and I think maybe that's tainting our vision of them a little bit too. But they've given a lot of teams fits. Since probably just before the holiday break, they started to be figured out a little bit.
They might be a dangerous out come tournament time, actually.
They might be, actually. So you can't how many times have we said this, right? You cannot count a single team in college hockey out of the picture until you put them to sleep, and it's the end of the third period. So it shouldn't surprise me. I think maybe it is a little bit just because, again, their wins are, and they're just so lopsided, right? There's no really true book on who this Wisconsin team is. That they're one team on a Friday, then the next next night on a Saturday, they're a completely different team, whether it's success or not. So I guess it shouldn't surprise us, but Ohio State's a pretty good squad. So maybe this is a little bit of a surprise, but I don't know. I'm done being surprised anymore.
Yeah.
It's just chaos.
What a description. A little bit anemic. I'd say that argument is a little thin, but yeah, red blood cell jokes in the Huskies Warming House podcast. Yeah. Anyway, let's move over and cauterize this. CCHA 2.0, Ferris State, Northern Michigan. This one wasn't even close. Speaking of trying to stop the bleeding here, 9-2 and 8-3. I mean, I know Ferris State is not the strongest team, but the Wildcats decided they wanted to play hockey again. I'm not sure if there was some sort of injury or netminder thing, anything behind the scenes. I didn't really do a deep dive here. But yeah, Northern Michigan. Sweet for them. Mankato, Bemidji State. This was a split. Mankato 4-1 the first night. Bemidji State 2-1 in overtime. Good little victory for the Beavers there. This one was, I believe, at the Sanford Center this weekend. So
it wasn't a home and home, I think.
I know Saturdays or one of the days was.
Pretty sure it was home and home, but I'll double check that.
Definitely at the Sanford Center. Can't you tell that we're obviously extremely prepared here? This is what we do. For those who are following along, by the way, the Huskies game.
Both at Sanford. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah. For those following along, by the way, we'll get to this. We've seen bits and pieces of the Huskies game. We did not watch them in full ourselves, just based on our schedule. I think we're going to kind of encapsulate that a little bit more as we go on into next week as well too. So we apologize for that, but we're going to do our best. Box scores can tell you quite a bit about what happened, so it doesn't exactly, not shed light on what we know. As far as ECAC stuff, Quinnipiac, Harvard, and Quinnipiac all getting the wins they needed against Yale, Union, RPI, and Brown. The only surprise, Cornell actually losing 4-3 to Clarkson on Friday night, so that's a tough one for Cornell, obviously hanging around that, 10 to 20 spot in the pairwise right now. So that's a tough loss for them. Hockey East, Maine, UMass Lowell. This was from last week. UMass Lowell winning in a shootout. And then BU losing to Merrimack 4-1 and 4-3 in overtime. So a couple of good wins for Merrimack. Still do not know what their mascot is. I should probably look that up. And Maine, New Hampshire winning in a shootout up both times, 3-2 the first night. And then how about this? If you paid good money to watch this hockey game, 1-0 in a shootout. The Wildcats beat the Black Bears in Maine. UMass Lowell and Providence getting the first night in overtime. UMass Lowell in regulation, night number 2. UMass and BC, it was a sweep for them, outscoring UMass 10-4 on the weekend. And Northeastern played just on Saturday against Vermont, winning 3-0. Of course, going back to Monday, the Beanpot this phase number 2 completed this past week. BU losing to Boston College 4-2, and Northeastern and Harvard played to a 2-2 tie. So that is the Bean Pot all wrapped up and done. Atlantic hockey has some intrigue as we move into next week here, but AIC sweeping Air Force, a pair of 1-goal victories. That's important for them to stay pat where they're at. And Bentley and RIT, actually Bentley winning the second night 2-1 after losing 4-0. So Bentley has disrupted. I'm curious to see how they look in their conference tournament. I mean, they are not out of it by any means. They've not had a great season conference-wise, but they are not out of it. I don't know that anybody in Atlantic hockey is really out of it or in it for that. So for that to say it's everything to play for there, but certainly a little more interesting, I think, than in years past, where we could say, oh yeah, AIC was the definitive shoe-in. There's about 5 or 6 teams that have a chance to punch their ticket, so to speak. Independent-wise, Lindenwood, Arizona State, ASU winning 8-2 and 5-3, and then Long Island traveling to Alaska. Alaska Fairbanks winning 3-2 on that first night. Yesterday, when I looked, Fairbanks was up by 1 heading into the third period, and it was 6-3 was the final last night for Fairbanks. Of course, Fairbanks will have we'll move on this week as we preview. They will have Arizona State at Arizona State. So they are traveling all the way down south from Alaska there to get ready for their matchup. So what is on tap here? Other independent games. Anchorage, actually, they're back on the East Coast again, Nick.
They are.
They are headed to Yukon on Thursday, and then they play Long Island on Saturday. So they are back on an airplane again. And then on Friday, the U.S. Under-18s plays Lindenwood. So there's your independent non-conference games. As far as Big Ten, Michigan State is off. So that means Wisconsin travels to Penn State, Notre Dame travels to Michigan, and Ohio State travels to Minnesota. That'll be an interesting game for the Gophers there. CCHA 2.0, Northern Michigan's at Bowling Green, Lake Superior at Ferris, Michigan Tech at Mankato. Very curious for that matchup as well, too. And then Bemidji at St. Thomas. Let's see if the Tommies can make a little bit of noise against Bemidji State. ECAC action. We've got 3 Friday games, 3 Saturday games. Of course, it's basically the pairwise watch, so to speak. Cornell has Brown, Quinnipiac has Union, Harvard has St. Lawrence. So obviously any of those losses would be tough. And then Cornell has Yale, Quinnipiac has RPI, Harvard again with Clarkson. So, again, obviously they played before, but Clarkson, of course, disrupting Cornell last weekend. So seeing if any of those losses pop up on the other side of the expected column. Hockey East, Boston University travels to Vermont, Northeastern home and home against UMass, Merrimack at UMass Lowell, and a Saturday game for UNH versus Yukon. So things obviously heating up in Hockey East. And then Atlantic hockey, Air Force has RIT and AIC has Sacred Heart on Saturday only. So those are a couple of big games standings wise in Atlantic hockey. So anything you wanted to add about NCAA men's? I mean, I know we kind of cruised through that, but we're at that point where we are, if I can remember right, I always write down for the show, we are in week 22 of the college hockey season. So I believe we've got 2 more weeks. I think we have 24 or 25 weeks before we hit tournament time. So
correct. Yeah, really watching the CCHA, I think for me in terms of, the race to the top there, seeing, again, kind of watching Bemidji State, see what they do a little bit, just because we've seen them have these really interesting late pushes come tournament time. Just, making sure that, when you are in the championship game that you score legally, not underneath that. Sorry, Mankato. But and also, just how these other shape up, right? Because you kind of have to have your solid footing for any of these squads before the tournaments come start, because you're not going to move the needle super bad unless you lose to a really inferior opponent. Even then, if you're in that top 10 come tournament time, you're likely standing pat for the most part. So next couple of weeks are going to be huge in terms of where we see in the pairwise, and more importantly, Noah, just momentum, right? How are you playing the right way? How are you trending upwards as a hockey club? Because that's really the important thing. Pairwise can mean nothing if you're trending in the wrong direction, and I think we may have a topic on that for our hometown squad. Yes, I nailed it, didn't I?
Yeah, that was a good transition.
It was, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to move over to the NCHC here. Yeah. St. Cloud, interesting weekend. And pairwise, common opponents certainly helping the Huskies. And and previous results from the past weekend as well. Well, we start with Omaha. Like we mentioned, they were at Miami, 3-1 and 3-2 in overtime. The Mavericks win. Like I said, I know we're going to talk about the Huskies, and their struggles as of late, but the NCHC has gotten more and more competitive each weekend. I think that has to be said. Like it's not like, St. Cloud has necessarily fallen off a cliff, like these other teams that are at the bottom, which again, when North Dakota was at 7, that's an interesting way to say at the bottom. That tells you the type of year we're having. Right. But all these teams can play, on any given night, and certainly is showing in the second half of the season. CC at Western Michigan, the Broncos, a pair of victories, 4-1 and 2-1. St. Cloud probably could have used one of those from the Tigers to really boost them back up. Duluth traveling to Denver. It was a split in this one. DU 6-2 in the first night, 6-5. The Bulldogs win in night number 2. So I guess if it's a barn burner, so to speak, Duluth is all over it. And then St. Cloud losing 4-3 in overtime in night number 1 at Ralph Engelstad, 3-2 in a shootout. The Huskies win yesterday, officially a tie as far as the pairwise is concerned. Of course, the extra points beneficial for NCHC standings here. Yeah, we'll dive into it here. Attendance 11,486 in the first night when North Dakota won in overtime. Lot of special teams here. In fact, only one goal at quote unquote even strength, and it was the overtime 3-on-3 goal here. Kind of a wild night, actually, all things considered. North Dakota and St. Cloud trading power play goals in the first period. Yami Kranila 17th from Jack Peart and Zach Okabe. Kranila on the board again in period number 2 on the power play from Okabe and Spencer Meyer. So Huskies actually up 3-1 at one point in this game. 3 power play goals. Joey Molinar, only his second of the season from Aiden Spellacy and Josh Lidke. That's not a power play statistic you necessarily mark down. So the Huskies actually going 3 for 7 on the man advantage. North Dakota 2 for 4 as they get one back from Jake Schmaltz about a minute later to make it 3-2. And then with the extra attacker, Reese Gaber ties this game up and then gets the game winner a minute 26 into overtime. Jackson Blake, Ethan Frisch, the assist there. Huskies out shooting North Dakota 25-24. Not a great weekend overall in the faceoff dot for St. Cloud. 42.2%, 27 for 64 on the first night. Dominic Bassi an 8-3-3, stopping 20 of 24. Drew DeRitter stopping 22 of 25 for an 880. So not exactly a goaltender soiree either, so to speak. I mean, pretty, I was going to say a messy hockey game. That's not really the right description, but in the sense that there are some games that maybe are a little more like fast and loose, than other contests. And this kind of had everything. I mean, very special teams oriented here. St. Cloud, their power play continues to roll. Their penalty kill continues to struggle, at least in night number 1. 3-2 shootout victory for the Huskies. Attendance 11,751. That's a pretty good crowd, of course, up there in North Dakota. Shots 30-13 in favor of North Dakota in the second night. So you wouldn't have, if you had to guess which score correlated with which shot value, seems a little bit backwards, but nonetheless, credit the goaltending here of Jackson Castor. And for some reason, I updated this yesterday, but my sheet did not update. Jackson Castor, I believe he stopped 28 of 30, which was like a 920 or something. I'm guessing you have it. Do you have it in your notes still, Nick? Does it still pop up for you? What do you have for the net minding statistics here?
28 for 30 for Castor, 933 into Ritter, 11 of 13 for 846.
Thank you. Yeah, for some reason. And then the face-off percentage did stay here. So I do have 23 for 57, 40.4% for the Huskies. Not great, being outshot as well. We got started North Dakota on the board first. So again, another trend for the Huskies that's not great. They've given up the first goal quite a bit as of recent. Spencer Meyer on the power play gets one back, less than a minute left in period number 1. His third of the season from Zach Okabe, Jack Peart, and then Yami Kranila, boy, does he continue to roll. His 19th of the season. Even strength from Vieti Miettinen and Micah Miller just 18 seconds into the second period. North Dakota, third period on the power play. 1 for 3 on the man advantage. Huskies scoring on their lone power play opportunity. And then we went to the shootout, and the only goal scorer in the third round in regulation / sudden death, Grant Cruikshank, making his opportunity to give the Huskies crucial points in the NCHC. Of course, as we look at the NCHC, the Huskies now sitting, I don't want to say in no man's land, but sitting in 4th right now. I mean, it's really been sort of fall from grace here. Omaha and Western Michigan both ahead of them at 39 points compared to 36 for the Huskies. So St. Cloud at least one win and probably some tiebreaker stuff away from trying to climb back up to second. Denver, I don't think is going to be caught, at least. They've got 44 points right now. Minnesota Duluth at fifth with 26 points, North Dakota with 24, CC with 23, and Miami, of course, at 9. So looking back on this weekend, obviously defensive play has not been great. And like I said, we didn't watch the games, didn't watch it extensively, but I think, I know that we take a lot of time to really kind of dispel the panic button, on this show and really talk about, trends and that sort of things, teams that are slumping, because certainly it happens here. St. Cloud, to their credit, has done well getting games to the extra session and pulling out points, especially a lot of shootout points in recent. So that's one of the things that is a positive, because if you're losing games, just ask, the Boston Bruins, the Dallas Stars, the National Hockey League, you look at their losses, a lot of them are in the extra frame. So they're picking up points as far as that's concerned. And obviously, I believe the overtime finishes also alter the pairwise a little bit too, as far as that matchup as well too. So of course, don't forget St. Cloud sweeping North Dakota earlier in the season. So as far as the pairwise battle, I believe St. Cloud actually wins this one. And actually by a decent little tilt. So a little bit of damage control this weekend. St. Cloud somehow, I'm not really sure how, has moved up this weekend to 5.
BU fell. That was the big one.
Yeah. They've lost 4 straight, actually, have the Terriers. But, you look at this penalty kill woe. You look at the shot total on Saturday. I think we're at that point here, Nick, as we approach the late portions of February, only 4 games to go, of course, on the road against Omaha next week, and then finishing at home against Minnesota Duluth. We talked about how the last 8 to 10 games of this schedule had a chance to prove a little bit devastating for this Huskies program, maybe not so much in the pairwise, but NCHC here. This team has really dropped the ball lately, and I think we're moving towards that now. They haven't been blown out of hockey games, which I think is a positive, because you've got to make the big dance, and 2, you've got to be at least in hockey games. Like I'd be more terrified if they're losing 7-2, right? Right. But they are losing. They have not really had a good weekend where they've strung 2 games together where they've won handily or won in regulation. People keep on social media pointing to the loss of Dylan Anhorn, which I certainly. It probably has had a bigger impact than we'd like to admit, unfortunately, solidifying the back end. But it can't be just one guy, or it can't be just the penalty kill, although it's been really porous as of late. I don't even think it's the goaltending, because they're not getting a whole lot of help. But they haven't made that extra save that they were making in the first half either. What is going on with St. Cloud right now at probably one of the worst times?
It is a calamity, or a comedy of errors, you could say, right? First, I actually had a chance to talk with Gino Parrish last week about this, and he said it, and I think it's okay for us to say it now, Noah, because we've seen it now for 3 straight weekends of Husky hockey. They just do not look the same with Anhorn not back there, and there's a couple of reasons for that, right? One, they're getting pinned in their own zone more. You got Bushy playing on the top pairing with Josh Lidke, which I'm sure if you would ask Brett Larson off the record and there, that's probably not the tandem he would like as his first pairing. Also, too, Grant Cruikshank has essentially disappeared from the score sheet, right? He was essentially carrying this Husky squad through essentially January. He's been very, very quiet on the score sheet. And then 3, you kind of touched a little bit. Goaltending hasn't been bad per se, but they haven't, shall we say, stolen a game yet. And this Husky team just can't simply hold a lead either. They were up 3-1 on Friday, up 2-1 on Saturday. They're just not putting teams away. So you put all of this together in a puzzle, and this isn't just one weekend now, right? No, we said 3 weeks ago, okay, this is not great after Anhorn went down. Let's see how they respond, right? And then next weekend, they're kind of the same. They're not bad. Like I said, they're in hockey games, but they're just not right. You can tell there's a missing gear there. And this weekend is the exact same with North Dakota, right? In fact, if you were to ask, I think anybody in the Huskies, they left some on the table. Again, up 3-1 on Friday. You have to be able to finish off North Dakota, which has had their struggles this year. So again, credit to the Fighting Hawks. They're not going down without a fight. They can still score, when they, things are clicking for them. So it's not a pretty picture. And this goes back to the point before we talked about the Huskies, right? Knowing that is, yeah, they move up in the pairwise, but it doesn't mean jack, what, if you can't get to the dance and not play well. So I think it is fair to say that there's some panic here, and I think it's actually a warranted panic right now. They've got essentially 2 weeks to figure it out. They're going to be going up against the team right above them in the NCHC standings in Omaha on the road. This is probably the most pivotal weekend of the season coming up, where you have to feel like you're doing something better to go home. And you have who has been the ultimate disruptor the last couple of weeks in Minnesota Duluth, as they just never cease to amaze us how they just, no matter how things are going, that it just clicks for them at some point during this time of the year. So you mentioned the schedule. I'm not sure that the schedule itself, because you can't write where these teams are at, beginning of the season or even halfway. You can only control how you're playing. And right now, St. Cloud is continually shot them in the foot. Against Saturday, you lose Josh Lidke just a couple minutes of the game with a very, I would say, a kind of a wishy-washy 5-minute major. I get it, but okay, here and there. But again, you're not helping yourself, right? You're not getting yourself a chance to be in the best position to win a hockey game. So there's definitely some conversation for concern. I'm curious as to if you see the same thing that I'm seeing, or you're on the same level as there's some legitimate concern here.
Yeah, we're at about, like you said, 3 weeks to a month where we've had the same concern. I think now, really, I wanted to see if this team could rest and come back, and kind of rewrite the ship here. And they didn't really do that this weekend. They didn't hurt themselves this weekend, which I think is becoming a theme where it has been a bit of damage control, and St. Cloud has put themselves in a decent spot. But similar to last year, they're kind of pushing themselves into a spot they don't really want to be in right now.
Correct.
St. Cloud would be at home against Minnesota Duluth to start the first round of the NCHC playoffs. Not that that's worked out well in previous years. It's interesting you mentioned Grant Cruikshank. So I pulled up his game splits. In the first 23 games of the season, he did not have a point in 5 of them, one of them being the opener against St. Thomas. In his last 7, he has 1 point and has not had a point in his last 5. He had 1 point January 27th against Duluth, did not have a point the Saturday prior against Denver, and has not had a point against that other game in Duluth, against Miami, and against North Dakota. He has been absolutely quiet, versus he was good for at least a point or two, if not more, every weekend. So it's very interesting to kind of look at that split as well, too.
And mind you, not to cut you off, but a lot of his points, who are they coming from? Dylan Anhorn.
Yeah, exactly. And especially on that special teams piece too. And you look at guys, Zach Okabe, Yami Kranila have obviously been bright spots here that have kind of tried to keep the train rolling here, but you can't rely on 1 or 2 guys. You've got to have scoring throughout that lineup. No, this team is struggling right now. It is concerning. And, you look at, what St. Cloud has coming up here. I was trying to look at their schedule here. I thought maybe this is marked wrong. They've got Omaha coming up, so I'm not really sure. Omaha. Oh, these are Anhorn splits. No wonder. I saw Miami right before the last game. I was like, yeah, that's not right. We just played Miami. Anyway, this team is really struggling here. I also, if we want to sit here and add more salt in the wound before we continue to roll on the Huskies here, because why don't we just, pour it in and dig our finger in. We had a bet last week. A Super Bowl bet. Okay, I gotta ask first. Are you calling that holding call?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not. No.
And I'm not saying it wasn't holding, because by definition, it definitely was. I thought it was funny. I mean, we kind of talked about this on Twitter a little bit. It likens me to the same concept of, if you have a tie hockey game under 5 minutes left in the third or overtime, the whistles kind of disappear kind of thing.
They do.
And I thought, maybe you could have let that one go. The ball was badly overthrown, but nonetheless, I mean, I know that doesn't make a difference regardless of what the play ends up being, but kind of an unfortunate end to what otherwise was a really good game. I think, obviously Kansas City will take it, but I think you want to win that game, in dramatic fashion in at a tightly contested. You make a great defensive stop after you score because they have time on the clock kind of thing. But nonetheless, I mean, it was a great football game. All things considered, I don't think either of us anticipated it was going to be that high scoring. I mean, was it as entertaining as?
It was a good game.
Yeah.
And again, ball was overthrown. So my judgment is when you actually looked at the replay, again, by definition, is it a hold? Sure. Now, did he actually impede his progress? Did he actually throw him off his route as much to warrant a flag? I don't know. I think for the way the game was called, that was a ticky-tacky, bad timing pick, a spot to pick to throw a flag. Now, again, the officials, no matter what, if he throws the flag or not, he's gonna hear the negative Nancy's about it. But in that particular situation, and I think this for hockey fans too, right? We're so used to, I guess, because the playoffs, I mean, there's what does get called, right? It's just like you could almost like axe chop a guy.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's a hockey play.
And it felt a little bit late, but I mean, it is what it is. It's just hard because you know that it was the game altering.
It was,
play. So
if that isn't called, it's an incomplete pass. But what was it, about a minute and a half left on the clock?
Yeah, you probably have about
and they have 2 timeouts too. Remember,
Yeah.
after that call, they go down. They actually intentionally give themselves up before the goal line, to force them to use their 2 timeouts. And then by the time they get the ball back on a squib kick, it's 5 seconds left.
Yeah.
So that's tough, right? So you think even with that, you get about maybe a minute and a quarter, at the worst case 60 seconds if they run the clock down. You've got 2 timeouts, so that changes the entire complexity of the last little bit of that game. So it's tough. I'm with you. I don't know. Would you have thrown the flag? I get the sense you probably wouldn't have thrown it.
Yeah, just because I don't really, like I said, I know that in football it's a little bit different, but like I didn't think it had a whole lot of bearing on the play. I feel like, it's the same in hockey. You have some of these interference pick plays when you get into like extra sessions and down to the wire that, obviously don't get called to, but nonetheless, it was
Noah.
Yeah. Nonetheless, though, it was a great football game, and I'll certainly eat the words that I said. Of course, I had the Eagles. They did not win the football game. And why are we talking about this in the middle of St. Cloud stuff? Because per the parameters, I've got about a minute to talk about a program called North Dakota and specifically their fan base. So why don't we jump right into it here, Nick? One of the things about North Dakota and their fan base, I mean, you look at the class that this fan base brings to this program. Okay. I mean, they are just, you go to a game at Ralph Engelstad. They're calm, they're cool, collected. I mean, you will not meet a North Dakota fan that has any animosity. I mean, like, they're rational thinkers. What they bring to the table as far as being elite hockey minds, I mean, it's second to none. I mean, you just look at, like I've never met a North Dakota fan that said anything at a hockey game that I've been like, wow, I can't stand this person. Like they're really good. Like they don't push people off balconies and stairs. Like they're amazing. And honestly, to be fair, though, in all actuality, they do travel really, really well, and they do bring a lot of energy to this North Dakota program. But North Dakota certainly likes to have a lot of fan engagement here, even if they maybe can't, name anybody that actually plays for their team. But nonetheless, with that being said, I did that once. I had a couple of friends who were North Dakota fans, and I asked them, I said, can you name 5 players on the team this year? And they get 1 or 2, obviously, and they know the goalie, they know the leading scorer, and yeah, wasn't too pretty beyond that. But nonetheless, now that we've gotten through that garbage, don't ever make me do that again, even though it was my idea. St. Cloud State obviously struggling, needing some crucial points this upcoming weekend here. North Dakota's at Colorado College. I don't know if their fans will travel for that one, but they should. Ed Robeson has been bumping this year. Denver travels to Western Michigan. That's, if you're a Huskies fan, I think at this point you hope that Denver sweeps that one. Miami's headed to Duluth, and St. Cloud will travel to Baxter Arena to Omaha. The only time the Huskies are on the road for more than 2 games in a row as far as the regular season is concerned here. If you're St. Cloud, you have your own destiny in your hands here because of the fact that you have the team right above you in the standings. What do you expect from St. Cloud? What needs to change here? Like, I don't know that the goaltending has been great for St. Cloud, but I'm not going to say it has been poor because I feel like, especially with Jackson Castor last weekend, Dominic Bassey the weekend before against Miami, whenever that was, holding this team in hockey games sometimes. They got to play much better in front of their netminders. The top line has been largely okay, but other than that, the scoring has kind of actually, it's been the top line, actually the fourth line, like Joey Molinar, Aiden Spellacy, those guys have been on the board more often than not as of recent. So that's a good sign. Other than that, what do the Huskies have to do to not only stop the bleeding, but like inflict it on the other side?
I gotta play with some desperation. Not that they haven't been, right? But I think now you need that extra gear. You need that extra push. And more importantly, you just need to be smarter with the puck in your own end. You need to be smarter on the rush. There's, like I said, we didn't catch the entire game, but I caught some of those extended highlights. And the one thing I've noticed, Noah, about this team and how different it is with Dylan Anhorn, right? Without Dylan Anhorn, I should say, for those who know English. They just simply aren't as confident possessing the puck, skating it out of their zone. There's a lot of off the glass and out, so a lot of pressure relief type situations, which here and there is not the worst thing in the world. You actually when in doubt, get it out. That's fine, but it can't be your go-to default setting, right? And also at times when the puck gets towards the crease, there's a lot of scrambling that the Huskies are losing their structure quite a bit and a lot quicker than they should. So they just need to be more confident in their positioning defensively. And if they're able to maintain that, again, as you and I both know, that transitions to better breakouts, that transitions to hockey and the puck moving north to the other way. So they just need to have a cleaner game. That's really what it is. And it starts in their own end. Brett Larson will be the first person to tell you that's his focus is, defense first and then moving the puck the other way because that, feeds into the offense. And they just haven't been as clean that way. And granted, I know it's tough. Anhorn was such a driver of possession, not only carrying the puck out of the zone, but then also being involved in the forecheck too. He was so dynamic and such a great 200-foot player. And with the defensive pairings being juggled as it is, and I'm not one to pick on players, but Brandon Bushy is, not your prototypical first line pairing. He just isn't. Yeah. Jack Peart has probably, if we're going to be honest with you, I don't think he's taken the steps that we expected him to take this season, or else I think Larson would have kept that pairing of Lidke and Peart, which he kind of did towards the end of last season. So it's been tough, but it really starts on their own end, and they've got to play more desperate hockey, I think, because otherwise, if they don't, and they continue this on for the fourth or fifth straight weekend where they're in hockey games, they're hanging around, but they're not really taking control and holding it, that is a trend that is not going to get you past even the first round of the NCAA. That's what I see. I'm curious as to your thoughts on what you see.
Yeah, this Omaha team is certainly going to present a challenge here. I mean,
they are.
We had this group finishing 7th in the NCHC. I think we're highly, highly surprised, obviously, with everything that's been going on.
We also said North Dakota was going to finish first, so basically you'll throw that entire prediction thing out the window, huh?
Yeah, not that ever happens, right? You look at Omaha, they're actually up to 13 right now, so certainly a big matchup for the Huskies. Now, on the bright side, if you struggle, it's not going to bury you. Right. Yeah, provided Omaha, I forget who Omaha has in their last week of the regular season, but I don't think they're going to, move too crazily. Denver is right ahead of St. Cloud. St. Cloud moving up 2 spots to 5. They are actually ahead of Western Michigan, still at 6. Michigan at 3, Quinnipiac at 2. The Gophers, of course, no blemishes yet besides really the game against Wisconsin, still sitting at 1. Penn State at 7, Ohio State, BU, Harvard, Tech, Mankato, Omaha, Northeastern, Cornell, Notre Dame round out. Alaska is actually up to 17 right now. So if they have a decent weekend coming up this weekend, they might actually
somebody else falls.
Yeah, make a case here. North Dakota is at 21 for those who are curious, by the way. Your Wisconsin pals are at 32. Duluth is at 23/24. I'm always looking for Miami here because Huskies fans need to know that one. 47 is where the Redhawks are right now, certainly slipping. CC at 39 right now. St. Thomas right ahead of Miami at 46 for other Minnesota schools. And I am looking for Bemidji State. There they are, 31, right ahead of Wisconsin. So there's kind of your general picture for the pairwise here. But yeah, St. Cloud's got to be better. They've got 4 hockey games to tune up before the playoffs here. And, I think that this year, I think it's fair to say if this group doesn't make the Frozen Face-Off, it can be considered a bit of a disappointment, considering what they brought to the table in the first half. They're going to have to find a way to remedy the loss of Dylan Anhorn, like you mentioned. Then they've got to find a way to play the right way. I know that one guy obviously is very important, but you've got to have better structure that, is going to push to that point. Is that on the coaching staff? Is that on the players? I think it's a healthy mix of both. I don't think there's one piece that you can put together here, but certainly Brett Larson, Dave Shayak, RJ Enga, they're kind of in scramble mode here, trying to figure out, the tweaks for this team here as we approach tournament time. So should be very interesting. Other side of things here, though, WCHA, women's hockey did exactly what they needed to do this weekend, 6-3 and 5-2, beating Mankato. Duluth did sweep Bemidji State. Minnesota sweeping St. Thomas, although it was 2-1 in overtime in night number 1. I wonder what the lineup card looked like. 4-2 in night number 2. I wonder what the lineup card looked like. I did not look for that. But then Ohio State losing to Wisconsin 6-5 in overtime. They play again today on Sunday. That, of course, has bearing on the playoff implications. We have the bottom 6 teams all set in the WCHA. We are just waiting on the top 2 because of the result of that game. Ohio State, I believe they for sure need a point, if not 2. 2 would definitely get them into first place. Right now it is Minnesota. So, and that, of course, will set up who they're going to have. Bemidji State will be the 8th seed. St. Thomas will be the 7th seed. Good on the Tommies for having a good second half push as well, too. So, before we recap the games, I guess we are talking about it. So Minnesota right now at 68 points, Ohio at 67. So Ohio State, basically a win today would, push them in because actually, based on tiebreakers, I believe Ohio State has to have at least 2 points. So they've got to win in some fashion, I believe. Wisconsin at 60, Duluth at 54. Huskies will get them in the first round at 36. Minnesota State at 30, St. Thomas at 12, and Bemidji State at 6. That's kind of rounding up what we're going to see. So the Huskies, of course, on the road against Duluth starting next weekend. Mankato will travel to Wisconsin for that matchup of 3 and 6. And then on the other side, of course, we await the other 2 matchups. But attendance, 541 on the first night, 6-3 St. Cloud, the victory here. Addie Scribner, Klara Himlarova, 2 goals for her. Courtney Hall scoring 2 goals as well. Taylor Lind, a goal on the power play. Tatum Geyer, Avery Myers, Emma Gentry, Grace Wolf, Taylor Lind, Dale Ross, and then Taylor Lind actually had a 3-point night for her, 2 assists. So a very good night for her as well. St. Cloud was out to a 5-0 lead before Mankato tallying a couple in the third, including a power play goal. And then the empty netter for the Huskies to seal the deal here. St. Cloud out shooting the Mavs 34-24, exactly 50% in the faceoff dot. In this game, JoJo Chobak, 8-7-5, stopping 21 of 24. Lauren Barbaro stopping 21 of 25 for an 840, and Alexa Berg stopping 7 of 8 that she saw. Huskies go 1 for 5 on the power play. Mankato 1 for 3 on the man advantage. Saturday did not get an attendance. They did not post it, unfortunately. I was very curious with the senior night festivities going on. 5-2, the Huskies get the victory. They were out 4-0 at one point here. Addie Scribner had a pair of goals. Emma Gentry, Svenja Vogt, Reagan Bulger, all with assists there. Courtney Hall from Taylor Lind and Dale Ross. Grace Wolf, her second of the season from Lyndon Himlarova. Taylor Lind, a 3-assist game for her in this one, along with Allie Cornelius, the secondary assist on Yanina Newland's goal in the third as well, too, to make it 5-2. Huskies did not score on 3 opportunities. Mankato 1 for 3. Back-to-back weekends where this women's team has given up at least a power play goal, I believe, in every game on the weekend, though. So kind of an interesting trend to keep an eye on. Obviously, the goal was late in the third in this one, but 57% the Huskies were in the faceoff dot, though. 32 for 56, out shooting the Mavs 29-25. Sonia Hola, a 920, stopping 23 of 25. Alexa Berg, 24 of 29 for an 828. Well, I mean, it's safe to say this women's team has certainly ended on a high note. Hopefully the men's team can follow suit here. Tell me what you think of the weekend, obviously, but I think all eyes turn toward that big matchup against Duluth in the first round of the playoffs here, and obviously looking at some, tournament seedings as well, too. this is a big weekend for St. Cloud, not only for, obviously, the first round of the playoffs, but is it fair to say maybe like seeding implications in some senses too? I mean, like this team has, an interesting look here as we take a look at some of the standings here moving into playoff time.
Yes, they do. And again, Duluth has been on a freaking tear, since before the holiday break. I mean, it goes to understated, right? How important this is in terms of trying to cap off at least right now what has been quite the season under Brian Idalski in his first year with the club, and trying to take a visible first step. Right now, we've seen a lot of steps this year, right? Taking care of business again this last weekend against Mankato with some very convincing victories. But this team isn't done. When was the last time we could say that? When it's been mid-February, right? This team is not done, and not only that, they've got a chance. They've got a legitimate chance to make some noise. And Duluth is going to be a tough test. Again, the top four, the WCHA this year has been rock solid. St. Cloud has looked, in parts very, very good against some of those top teams. Again, they've beaten Wisconsin. They've beaten Minnesota. They've come close against Ohio State, right? So they've had their fair share of good victories. Now, the question is, can they put it together against a top opponent like the Bulldogs? I think they are obviously capable of doing so. But they got to look at this as one of their best opportunities here to make some noise. You want to make sure you put together a good resume and see what happens. So this is huge for them. It goes without saying. This is going to be quite the weekend for the Huskies. And is it okay if I say this too, Noah, that no matter what happens, what a season it has been for them. They've been a treat to follow, and what a job everybody, the coaching staff, the players have done. They deserve all the credit in the world.
Yeah, certainly. Accolades obviously important, but as we know in Huskies hockey, you got to make sure that you're continuing to get the job done here. So for an idea here, of course, polls will come out tomorrow. Last poll, St. Cloud was at 12, right behind Vermont. Pairwise, they're at 11. Why do I bring this up? Don't forget, last year, the tournament format changed to a bunch of at-large bids getting in, of course, getting all the way out to 11 teams now for the NCAA tournament on the women's side here with some single elimination games as well. So that's why we talk about, I think for the Huskies, you got to have at least one this weekend. Regardless of the result, you like to have two and make sure you continue to keep that ball rolling. But you've got to have at least one, I think, to make your case here. Certainly a great weekend. I'm curious to see what the polling says as we approach tomorrow as well, too. But this women's team has a chance here to be an at-large bid. This is not, this is not us like saying, oh, they've got an outside chance. Maybe, if everything goes right, they have a chance if they continue to play the right way to have a chance here at a tournament. So I think that's a very exciting piece for this program, and very curious to see how the weekend goes. Obviously a very tough test against Duluth. Made me feel a little bit better. Their performance a couple of weeks ago against the Bulldogs. They've been playing the right way, trending in the right direction. Had a bit of a kind of a swoon a little bit in the middle of the second half of the season, and since then have really rebounded with about 4 or 5, maybe even 6 strong games on the back end here, which is exactly what you're looking for heading into tournament time here. So the women's team, this is a year where everyone says, oh, you kind of hold your breath at tournament time. I think this is the first year I haven't held my breath in quite a while with this women's team heading into tournament time, because I have confidence knowing what they can do. And it's certainly going to be a very exciting ride to the finish here, and we can't wait to see what this women's team brings to the table. I know that maybe seems like a bit of a short preview for the women's side, but I mean, really, the bread and butter, of course, approaching next weekend. We're going to have everything to play for coming up this weekend. So if you have a chance, if you're around the Duluth area and have a chance to support this women's program, they can certainly use it as we push into the postseason. Minnesota Wild, will they even be in the postseason? That's the first question.
That's actually a legitimate question.
29, 21, and 5, 63 points. They are 2 points out of third in the Central and 4 points out of the first wild card. +5 goal differential as they sit in the second wild card. They are Colorado, of course, is 2 points ahead or 1 point ahead with one game in hand. Minnesota 4-5-1 in their last 10. Their 7-game homestand ends on Tuesday. They have Nashville today on Sunday around 1 o'clock. LA on Tuesday. Then they're on the road at Columbus and Toronto Thursday, Friday before coming back home on Sunday to face Columbus again. They've actually got a pretty jam-packed week this week. Past week, Florida 2-1 shootout loss at home. Colorado 3-2 regulation loss that past Wednesday. Dallas a shootout victory. And then, of course, Nashville today they will have in the mid-afternoon. This Minnesota team really could have used that Colorado game. The real issue here, Nick, that we kind of really go back to here, this team cannot score.
On 5, they cannot score.
Yeah, they definitely can. It's actually, I had sent this, of course, in our little group chat here, if I can find it. An interesting article that, of course, we had in The Athletic. I believe it was Michael Russo. I'd be shocked if it wasn't. But he mentioned the Wild, and I believe this was before last game. They hadn't scored a goal without Kirill Kaprizov on the ice in 328 minutes and 20 seconds, which was Jonas Brodin scoring in the third period against Arizona 6 games prior to that article. And it had been 12 games since a Wild forward not named Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Eriksson, Boldy, or Ryan Hartman had scored, which was January 14th. That's not good. I mean, Minnesota, we'll talk about the trade deadline stuff maybe in the extra ice session too, but yes. I do not envy Bill Guerin's job at this current point here. I mean, what do we make of this team? Like where I don't know. I don't know where to start.
Bill Guerin knows, right? And I think this is, and I think we'll save most of this for the trade deadline in the extra ice, but shall we say that the team has not put him in a good spot, right? In terms of what he's got to sort out, in terms of, do you want to acquire players? Do you want to sell off players? Do you make call-ups? Because, again, that costs you cap space, too. They did with Adam Backman just to try to, maybe splur up something. What do you do with guys like Sam Steele? Alex Goligoski. There's a lot of question marks, and more question marks than you want if you want to be a playoff contending team. Not even cup contending. I mean, let's be honest, they're just not, right? Right now the decision is this team even a playoff contender? And I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe we start with that too, because I know, like, obviously people have talked about Ryan Reeves being in the lineup too and that sort of thing. We talked about this with the Iowa Wild deep dive last week, so go check that out. But, you look at guys like Sammy Walker, obviously that we talked about last week, Marco Rossi, if we're going to go to that, whole debacle here.
Should not be up here. I will say that's one guy.
What are the internal moves that, people are clamoring for internal moves? What would you see that would be fitting for this team? Is there some credence to what people are saying, or do you feel like, maybe we should stand pat? Where are we at here?
So where people are at, because, people can play armchair GM, right? And that is that everybody knows the cap space situation in Minnesota, right? So they technically have about $10 million they can acquire for the trade deadline. So they've got more, because again, you accrue cap space every day. Don't ask me how it all works, little detail by detail, but it's kind of complicated.
Yeah.
So then they're looking at, Iowa Wild, they're doing okay. So how about the Sammy Walker guy who's leading the rookies in the AHL in scoring? Adam Beckman has been another hot hand for Iowa. There's your fixes. You don't have to go out because you don't have the money and you don't want to give up assets in a deep draft, right? So at the end of it, that was the easy conclusion. Now, they're not wrong, per se, except for one thing. Why would you call up young players and put them into a dumpster fire of a situation? And essentially, because let's be honest, they know what's going on. They understand the struggles, right? And don't tell me that isn't a mind game for their own as they enter the ice, right? So the question is that the right move for not only the team and in Minnesota, the team in Iowa, and more importantly, the player in his development, right? It's not as simple as a equation as you want to make it seem like it is. Yeah. Because if it was, Bill Guerin's already pulling the trigger, right? So I don't know. Is it could you call up Sammy Walker? Sure. Now, do you want him to be the savior? No. Should he be? No. So it really comes back to the ultimate question: where do we see this team? I think right now, based on the recent struggles, this team, obviously the biggest thing is they can't even strength score if their life freaking depended on it. And calling up, a rookie essentially from the American Hockey League that's got 21 goals, 22, wherever it is, leading the pace of his club, and expect him to be that jolt is just not fair to anybody at this point. So I don't know.
Well, speaking of saviors, Marc-Andre Fleury really struggled. Surprised he got the start against Colorado of all games. Philip Gustafson, though.
Oh, but he wasn't he was not a NHL talent. Remember that, Noah?
I know.
That's the thing. You say that, right, on this podcast, even before the puck drop. Give this guy some time to adjust to the system. He's a technically sound goaltender. We defended him since day one. And now people are like, well, ride the Gus bus. And can we say we told you so?
Exactly. And think about what a steal this would be for Bill Guerin, 23, 24 years old, developing a Minnesota system. Cam Talbot, obviously in Ottawa, but you got younger at the goaltending position and maybe got a little bit better.
And one catch, though. He's an RFA with arbitration rights. So here's why they play Fleury, Noah, because now with Gustafson, his trade value keeps but his value keeps going up.
Yeah.
So that you already are grasping for dollars. You have no idea what the cap situation is. This team cannot win. So I know what's that Lester's looking through this. I'm like, why would you play Fleury? Now, granted, he's struggled, sure, like any other player can. He's been okay for the most part for this season. Dare I say there's a little bit of circumvention going on right now. It kind of feels that way.
And keeping him obviously in that rotation too. You don't want a guy to sit for a long time, a la Cam Talbot last year. But the other piece that I want to ask before we move on to the extra ice session, because I feel like we're tantalizingly close to talking about the trade deadline for Minnesota. Dean Evason.
Yeah.
Is he on the hot seat? Is he, what do you think about his decision making? Because people have talked about the lineup card. Of course, Kalen Addison scratch, which I thought it was funny that people are like, wow, you're going to scratch the one guy who's bringing offense in the back end of the power play. I'm like, well, yeah, he's like dash 17 and he's got 28 points. So that tells you.
Absolutely, SHIT. It's a pile of crap.
Exactly. So what's the deal with Dean Evason? Do you think he always makes sound decisions? Do you think he's a little bit erratic at times?
Yeah, but I think also remember last season he didn't have to. That's the big thing. Last year things were clicking.
Yeah, career years for a lot of guys.
Isn't that hilarious? Yeah. How as a coach when it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And I think for Dean Evason, when it's got to be the most frustrating position for him to be in when largely the roster minus Kevin Fiala is back, right? And this team goes from a top 5 team in 5-on-5 scoring to a bottom 5 team. Like it was, and I don't know if it's that extreme, but they were for sure in the top 10 5-on-5 scoring last year. There's no question. Yeah. Team also last year was able to come back in games. They were never out of it. This year, it's like they go down, and it's a struggle for them to come back. And you can attribute that to many different things. But
it's funny. I always chuckled that people always said, "Oh, Kevin Fiala, listed as a game breaker," but they're like, "Oh, does he really break a game wide open?" That's one of the things he brought to the table last year. Is he was a guy who, it's a 2-2 hockey game. The Wild have given up the last 10 shots, and then he'd come down and pick his way through 2 guys and just find a seam and put a puck in the net. And he was an all-star this year. Like it obviously goes to more than that, but that's the type of guy that they're missing is this guy besides Kirill Kaprizov. Matt Boldy has played that role a little bit at times, but there really isn't anyone else that you can say, okay, flip a switch, lightning in a bottle, boom. Here's a guy that'll suddenly just give you a jolt, a real, electrical shock, so to speak.
Beyond Kaprizov. And I think that has to be understated too, right, Noah? Is that last year they had that 1-2 punch, right? Yeah. Where Kaprizov line with Zuccarello and Hartman would come out, and then they would have a good shift. You followed up with Gaudreau, Boldy, and Kevin Fiala, to continue to sustain that offensive pressure and be dangerous, right? Yeah. This year, without that really beyond that top line, they're just a threat of scoring. And so you're seeing Kaprizov being double shifted. You can see that he's he's trying to put this team on his back, and he just can't do it, right? And he's a human being. He can't. So it's tough, right? And yeah, Addison is terrible defensively. Let's just call it what it is. He's not great right now. Whatever that is, I don't think it's a size thing. I think simply he gets caught puck watching a little bit too much, and sometimes gets on the wrong side of the puck. But at the end of it, there's so many contributions to the reason why. And I think if you're Bill Guerin, I think if you're Dean Evison, you're kind of just like shaking, the dice in a Yahtzee cup and just trying to see if you roll out something that works, right? So now, granted, is there something to maybe some timing of decisions? Yeah, like Dumba being scratched twice. Okay, like I get if you're playing bad, deserve a spot.
Doesn't this go back to the same conversation we had about Brett Larson? The coach obviously can make some decisions that can hamper teams, but at the end of the day, you got to go out and play.
Yeah, and at the end of it, I think everybody, including us, was expecting some regression with people having careers, but they're not even meeting pre-last year numbers, right? It's been literally a black and white sort of transition for this squad, and it's just something you can't predict, right? And this team, in terms of the folks who are making decisions, are scrambling, trying to figure it out, and there's no easy answer to it, unfortunately, the situation they're in.
Well, we'll see if we can figure it out. We're going to jump on over to our extra ice session to see if the Minnesota Wild have a plan coming up at the trade deadline. Welcome into the Extra Ice Session, episode 150. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant, here on this Sunday, February 19th here. Well, we just talked about the Minnesota Wild, so let's talk about them again. All right, the real question here, Nick. What in the world does Bill Guerin do at the trade deadline? We are about 2 weeks away. Does he do anything? Does he do nothing? Do they buy? Do they sell? Should we blow it all up? Should we move Minnesota's to Quebec City? What's the call?
Obviously, we're going to Quebec City,
for a fourth rounder and Ryan O'Reilly.
Yeah. Tough, right? So let's talk about the position that they're in, right? So second wild card spot, technically tied with Calgary. They get the tiebreaker just based on games played. When you go beyond Calgary, it's a 5-point cushion with the Nashville Predators. Here's the problem. Nashville has played 3 less games than Calgary and 2 less games than Minnesota, right? So they've got a big game against somebody today too. Yeah, they do. So at the end of it, it's right, us. How about that? So it is the worst position to be in if you're an NHL GM, which is where you're at right now. You're literally on the playoff cutoff line, and you don't know, whether this team who's got some serious flaws. We've already highlighted them earlier in the show. And as much as you want to be, like a Mike Keenan and just sell everything off and, try to bring in all the, late 80s Blackhawks and late or early 80s Oilers and say, help, we fixed the problem.
And
doesn't work that way.
And maybe a couple extra screws to make sure the benches are nailed down if you've got him there.
Exactly. You just don't have the available cap space. You do not want to give up any future in your prospects. You've got a deep prospect pool, and you're not in a position where you want to give up a prospect or a high draft pick. You're just not there yet, right? If you're a Stanley Cup contender, if you're in a position, shall we see New Jersey's in, maybe you make a big splash, Timo Meier. So you're just not there. So you're in a position where it's like you don't know if you're that good enough where it makes sense to make any moves. So I think, honestly, if it were me, the GM, you're going to be selling. That's going to be my prediction. You're going to sell.
So you think, especially next 5 games, 5 or 6 games, we're going to know by the end of next week, and that's about a week before the trade deadline. So You think if Minnesota especially drops 4 of their next 5 or 6
they're going to be selling, and it's not going to be a total fire sale, but maybe some guys that you feel like you're not going to get back. So Matt Dumba, maybe, right? There's been multiple reports that Jordan Greenway's been shopped. I think he goes as well. You have decisions to make, and at the end of the day, I don't know where, as much as being highly touted, I don't know where Brock Faber, and what they expect him to jump in. Again, that's really not fair for him to be the savior. I think he would be best suited to go to the Iowa Wild just to get his feet wet. Not to say that he can't do it, but again, just trying to make sure you're developing your talent the right way. If you're going to fall like that, you just got to make the move. I'd be curious if they do flip, like say Ryan Reeves. I would be shocked if they flipped. You wouldn't be shocked if they flipped Sam Steele, who has, kind of fallen out of favor as of recent. It's interesting, right? I don't know how you go about this, but I think you're going to sell it off if you're in that position. And try to, again, build up that prospect tank. And at the end of it, if you're going to be bad a year, and granted, we don't want to have this conversation, but with a very incredible deep draft, in fact, one of the more talented drafts that have been since 2015, McDavid Eichel. Not the worst timing, especially when you already have a good space in the cupboard already filled. Want to stockpile it even more? I don't know. What do you think?
And hopefully, a couple of years of cap alleviation for the Wild, regardless, too, that, maybe you're preparing for as well, too. Let's be theoretical. Let's say the Wild win 5 of their next 6. Let's say they find some chemistry. They start popping 5-6 a night. They start rolling. One of the rumors, somehow, that in the mix as one of the suitors for Patrick Kane, the Minnesota Wild are listed here. Let's start with some other big fish on the trade board here. Patty Kane, 1, does he move? And 2, if so, where does he go?
He is moving. He is not coming to the Minnesota Wild. You have to remember that Patrick Kane has a full new move clause. And if he's going to go anywhere, if you're Patrick Kane, you want to win a Stanley Cup, do not tell me that this is a team right now he looks as having the best chance to win a cup. There's just no freaking way. Now, could he be the Kevin Fiala missing piece? Maybe. But again, and not only that, what's the return going to cost the Wild?
Yeah. Is that enticing enough that Patrick Kane would like to be here as riding shotgun to Kirill Kaprizov and say, after this year, I'd like to be here as part of being one of the guys, so to speak?
I think if you're the Wild, I think you stand pat. And I would be remiss to think that Patrick Kane has us high on his list. I would think if you're Patty Kane, you're looking at teams like New Jersey, to stay out east, maybe Carolina, teams that are actually, in the driver's seat, top of their division, top of the Eastern Conference. And again, you kind of wonder too, those intra-divisional trades that usually don't happen like this, but with Patrick Kane, again, having sort of his say, he's kind of in control of this.
He's earned that. I mean,
100% he's earned it.
Yeah.
And again, you go back to the same argument, right? I just don't know if the Wild are really, really willing to give up the assets that Chicago's going to ask for Patrick Kane. So, I mean, could you be the weird beneficiary at the end of this year with Patrick Kane if he does not sign an extension, if he does get traded? I think he does get moved. Question is to where? To me, it's going to be out east. I would put my money on New Jersey to make a push because that would be, or Carolina. That'd be the 2 teams I would look at. You mentioned
Timo Meier as well too with New Jersey. What about Jonathan Taves? That's more of an interesting.
He's not going anywhere.
You don't think so?
No, I think because I think they just put him back on injured reserve, if I recall correctly. That's been the number one question with NHL teams is his health, right? There's no question when he's healthy, he still has the ability to play. But I think with questions of his and how just his durability, that's been a tough sell.
A couple of other guys here. One that's been linked heavily to Minnesota in the recent year, Brock Besser, Vancouver.
Nope.
Think he's staying. Max Domi, Chicago.
No way.
Max Domi, Chicago, 27 years old, pending UFA, obviously, but a very good goal scorer for the Hawks right now. Good little physical presence. A guy that would fit in well to some decent lineups.
I again with Max, he's streaky. He's very streaky. And he's got an edge to his game, which with Reeves, you already sort of have that. So I don't know if he's the type of player they're looking for at the moment. And again, with Max Domi, what does he bring to the table you don't already have?
How about on the back end, Jacob Chikrin, who's been out since February 11th, essentially waiting for a trade. For him, it sounds like the Coyotes obviously want to move him. I mean, who is the potential suitor here?
Oh, boy. Well, he was linked to Toronto for a little bit, too. You can scratch the Maple Leafs off off the list, at least right now. Now, I say that because the Maple Leafs somehow got Ryan O'Reilly with a third team involved, again, the Minnesota Wild, so you can't say never, because that's been the big talk in Toronto is, are you willing to give up Matthew Nice? Now, they didn't with the Ryan O'Reilly move. Question is, what's Toronto's been their biggest weakness over the past couple playoff series has been defense, right? So Ryan O'Reilly, good defensive forward, right? So they kind of address that a little bit. He's a good 200-foot player, but I still feel like they're very thin at blue line. So to give up Justin Hall, I still in a weird spot. And this just me being crazy, I don't think Toronto's out of the Chychrun sweepstakes just yet, but I would see, New Jersey's highly in on Chychrun. Again, Carolina, I could see maybe even, I know the Rangers are kind of thin on their cupboard space too in terms of assets. So maybe the New York Islanders too, I could see.
Right.
But I don't know. We'll see. That one's a tough one because again, when you're going to give up assets for Chychrun, you want to make sure you can have a chance to re-sign him too. Just as much as with the Horvat thing, I said it would be shocking a couple weeks ago that they weren't working on an extension. They did. They did that 8-year extension essentially. I think the same day we released the episode. So that's kind of where I'm at. These players are all going to get moved. The question is, to where and for what's the return.
Yeah, what about like a place like Los Angeles, for example, as well too? You have Carl Gunstrom, who of course is on injured reserve as well. I was even thinking maybe a place like Dallas if they could find a way to offload some cap as well too. So he's going to be an interesting case. I mean, it's a team that has a necessary need. I don't know that Dallas really has a necessary need on the back end. I mean, the only guy that
and going back to Chychrun with LA has kicked the tires in Chychrun quite a few times, and they haven't pulled the trigger because the asking price is so significant. And, you kind of wonder too with, they've been trending up recently. Does Rob Blake, make a last second pull of the trigger there? It's going to be hit or miss for me. It wouldn't shock me if he did, but again, it's, they had, since their 2014 Stanley Cup run, again, they gave up a lot of assets. It took them some time to kind of regather themselves. I'm kind of wondering if he's a bit gun shy on the asking price for Chychrun to the Arizona Coyotes. So that's my only concern with them. But I know they talked about him being the favorite to land there with LA, but again, they've had the opportunity multiple times to do it, and they haven't pulled it. So to me, you kind of wonder if the prices are going to come down before the next couple of weeks. I don't know if they would with Chychrun because Arizona has been really good at getting fair value back with their new GM Armstrong. So I don't know. I'm not as sold with Chychrun to LA as people are making it seem.
Yeah, Shane Gostisbehere, another name floated around for the Coyotes. John Klingberg from Anaheim, Vladislav Gavrikov, obviously for the Blue Jackets as well too. I've got two more names that I would like to throw out here. One defenseman, of course, Erik Karlsson. Has been shot by San Jose. Do you see him staying? Do you see him going? That's kind of a tough contract.
He is not moving anywhere because of his term and with so much uncertainty with the cap situation too. I don't think I think there's interest there for sure. But I think people, who would want to acquire them are looking at the term that's remaining with Karlsson. And again, with so much uncertainty in the cap structure coming up, I just think that's too much of a mid-season right now without knowing where the cap's going to be. And now with the Pally situation, right? Again, that could affect the NHL salary cap next year. I think teams are going to wait on Karlsson as much as he's been a return to form with San Jose. It's been really nice to see. He's been playing some of his best hockey in quite some time since his days in Ottawa before his injury stints. I just think that the price is just too much, and it would take a lot to offload to bring him on. And he's got 4 years left on his deal. I think I think so. That's a lot of term that I think teams are not willing to take on during the midseason.
Yeah, certainly. Net mining help here. Karel Vejmelka, 2 years left at 26 years of age. He might be an interesting look, but the goalie I want to talk about here, 29-year-old John Gibson, 4 seasons remaining on his contract for the Ducks. Last guy that I want to talk about here. Do you think he moves anywhere?
No, I don't. He hasn't looked great, honestly. And again, the term scares off a lot of teams, especially with some situations.
That team is so bad, though.
I get that, but also with John Gibson too, there were times where even the past couple of seasons, he was sort of single-handedly keeping them in games, and he's been, shall we say, he's been in and out of injuries. Again, that term just and again I go back to it. It sounds like a scapegoat answer, but the reality is, with money being so tight with so many NHL teams. And with his health, not being 100%, I think there's questions around John Gibson. If you're going to trade assets to get a player for that term, you want to make sure you're worth it. I'm not sure John Gibson is going to move, just because simply, again, there's just so much that he carries with him that a lot of teams just simply don't have the room for him, one, and do too many question marks, and his cap hit isn't necessarily the smallest either. So
yeah, certainly is a workhorse, though, former Olympian as well too. We'll take a look on it, and we might revisit this topic next week, I would imagine, of course, as we have push. Of course, trade deadline March 3rd, 3 p.m. Eastern time is the cutoff, so we will be paying attention. St. Cloud State, the men's team, Omaha, is on the docket at Baxter Arena this weekend. 4 games left in the regular season. Women's hockey up in Duluth, the WCHA playoffs start now. The Minnesota Wild have 5 games, almost 6, essentially within the span of a week. So pay attention. It's going to be a very interesting ride to the finish here. For Nick Maxon, I am Noah Grant, and we will see you soon in the den.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Permix!
Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.